Next up is Randy Mastro, who is the former Deputy Mayor of the City of New York from excuse me. Sorry to do that, Randy, to you. From 1996 to 1998, and is currently a partner at Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher. Randy?
Thank you very much. I first want to thank all of you for the opportunity to speak on this important subject. And I want to acknowledge a couple of people who are here in the audience. I want to first acknowledge Councilman Bill de Blasio, currently representing him before the Conflict of Interest Board. He's one of the heroes of this piece, and Bill, thank you for your leadership on this issue. I also want to acknowledge one of the great commissioners and former councilman, a great New Yorker, Henry Stern, who is with us tonight. And I want to start by quoting someone very wise about city government, about the legislature and the executive, who today wrote that this attempt to change term limits by legislation is, quote, the greatest assault on democracy that we have ever seen in city government, end quote. That was Henry Stern. And the reality is that whether or not you like term limits, process matters, and this process stinks. And Professor, with all due respect, I believe that ultimately this process will be found to be illegal for a variety of reasons that I will explain. Now, Councilwoman Diana is an old and dear friend, and she is right that the mayor, for whatever reasons, chose to forego appointing a charter revision commission when he told us earlier that he was going to do that, and could have put this on the ballot for November had he done so. But I just want everyone in the room to understand it is absolutely legal today for the mayor or the city council to appoint a charter revision commission that could put this matter on the ballot at a special election early next year. So that opportunity remains for us. Petitions don't even go out until June of '09. You don't have to qualify for the ballot until July of '09. There's plenty of time to do it right, Mr. Mayor. You can still do it right. Now, the professor spoke very eloquently in framing the issues, but I think in framing the issues, the professor largely answered the questions. This is a rush job that offends anyone who cares about local democracy, whether it is ultimately found to be legal or not for the city council to do this. What is the rush to judgment in 2 weeks with the window of opportunity being our fiscal crisis nationally? Now, this is not the time and the vagaries of the moment to fundamentally alter our democratic system. We faced a similar crossroads in 2001 after 9/11. And then the city and the mayor got it right. And they didn't go forward with any attempt to alter the electoral system then. This mayor has the opportunity to show that he can get it right too. Trust the voters who twice ratified term limits to have their say. And I have to say, I'm about to be followed by another old friend, Mitchell Moss, who in his more independent days back in 2001 was very critical of the efforts to alter our electoral system when it was a different crisis and a different mayor. And he will undoubtedly tell you when he gets the microphone that, oh, well, this we can't have a referendum. We can't let the voters decide because not enough of them will show up. Well, as the professor pointed out, yes, not as many people voted for mayor as voted on the referendum. But as the professor can also confirm to you, more than 500,000 New Yorkers voted in each of those referenda. And we are in, if such a crisis, I know that I hear about this issue every day from many New Yorkers. They will show up to vote on this issue. And if they think that it is right that Mike Bloomberg and the incumbent city council members have another term, they will show up to vote on that question because they're telling us now it is such a critically important issue it is disingenuous to suggest that the voters would not show up under those circumstances. Now, if I may briefly explain, to follow up on the professor's point, and I always hate to disagree with the professor, but there are multiple reasons why this particular legislative process may well, at the end of the day, be found to be illegal, and why I believe that it is illegal. We start first and foremost with the fact that this is a blatant violation of the city's conflict laws. It's a blatant violation of the plain language of those conflict rules, which provide 2604B3 that a, quote, public servant, end quote, will not, quote, use, end quote, his or her, quote, position, end quote, directly or indirectly for, quote, private or personal advantage, end quote. Well, if those words have meaning, they certainly have meaning that a city council member, term limited out of office, cannot be expected to vote on legislation that keeps them in office and that not be considered to be using your position for private or personal advantage. And we've written to the Conflicts Board on behalf of Public Advocate Betsy Gottbaum, whose term limited and would be out of office, Council Member Bill de Blasio, who stands tall as a term-limited council member, but wanting to see that the law is properly followed, and Councilwoman Letitia James, whose situation is not dissimilar from what Diana described about her own situation and rise to office in a contentious environment, and one that term limits permitted the opportunity for her to serve. And I might add, permitted the opportunity for Mike Bloomberg, who never would have run for mayor had we not had term limits. We would still, he would never have had the opportunity under those circumstances back in 2001. So I think that it's very clear that there's a conflict of interest here, that it violates city conflict rules. I will give you one quick example. That same conflicts board that will have to rule on this application ruled that David Dinkins, when he was mayor, couldn't even vote as part of the quasi-legislative body that approves franchises, couldn't even vote on the Time Warner franchise because his son owned 1% of a Time Warner subsidiary. And they ruled he couldn't even vote under those circumstances. How on earth could it be anything other than the council members, term limited out of office, the vast majority, could vote on this without violating city conflict laws? And even worse now is that council members, knowing of public reports of backdoor deals to undo this later between billionaires and of deals between mayors and speakers, they would be violating city conflict laws by aiding and abetting the conflict violations of other public servants. That is a separate provision of our conflict laws. So I think that's a very serious legal impediment to this law. More importantly, Professor,
Randy, I just did another minute or so.
Sure, I will wrap up. More importantly, there are wholly separate reasons under the Voting Rights Act, where we have seen term limits bring increased minority representation in city government and in the city council, where we see one of the two leading candidates for the mayoralty being an African American who will now effectively be denied that opportunity if Mike Bloomberg runs again. We also see that even the existing precedents, they were sharply divided courts in one appellate division on that issue of whether by legislation our local council can undo term limits. And that was just for a tweak in the law to correct the imbalance that a handful of council members only got 6 years. These are issues that deserve to be litigated. These are issues that will be litigated. I'm honored to be representing my clients on a pro bono basis. And I have to say, in conclusion, that democracy depends upon not only our public officials honoring their oath, but entrusting the public to perform their democratic duty in voting. Term limits twice ratified by the voters. The only way to preserve and protect and honor our democracy is to put that question back to the voters. So, Mr. Mayor, do the right thing. Let the voters decide. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Randy.